with a daily news update. And I guess the most significant news of the day is Raw got its lowest non-holiday rating ever for yesterday's episode, which was a 0.60 rating, the lowest number they have ever hit in the ratings history, other than on a Christmas or New Year's episode. So it makes me wonder what they're going to get next week, because this week's episode was live, but next week's episode was actually taped before the live episode this week. And if any of you guys remember why, it's because originally they were scheduled to tape it next Monday live, according to reports. But according to reports, there was less than 1,000 tickets sold for the show that was supposed to take place next Monday. So it was canceled, and they ended up taping both episodes this week. George Tezakis, sorry about your last name, says good death to WWE on that. Thanks for the comments. JR Wizzle says, wow, next week's going to be bad then. Well, reading the results, nothing really interesting happened on next week's episode. On this week's episode, I guess they had a gauntlet match that was for the #1 contenders spot for the US title or something. And it went an hour long with no finish. And then someone else ended up getting the title shot, so it made no sense. The high point of Raw was the Randy Orton versus AJ Styles match. And for anyone that hasn't seen it, watch my match against AJ Styles on the Hannibal TV. I pinned him 2 times in one night when he was New Japan Pro Wrestling IWGP Heavyweight Champion. PJ Blake says, what's my opinion on why the ratings are so low? Because the product is not interesting. That's the simplest reason. The product is not interesting, and the characters, for the most part, are not interesting. Randy Orton, as I've said before, he's a great performer, but he's been around forever now, since, I don't know, 2002. So they don't have like the next, you could say the next John Cena, even though John Cena never got to the level of The Rock, Hulk Hogan, or Austin. But they don't have the next any of those guys right now. In other wrestling news, WWE Backstage tonight. We'll see if they continue to fall in ratings too. They're bringing on William Shatner. So yeah, I guess they want to get some Star Trek fans or something. Apparently, according to the Wrestling Observer, Bandito, who recently lost the Ring of Honor world title to PCO, has not re-signed with Ring of Honor yet, but it's looking like it very likely could happen. Shane Taylor, who I have no idea who that is, and Colt Cabana are gone. I've never seen the entertainment value of Colt Cabana. I know he's a comedy wrestler. We have a few of his matches on this channel. None of them got that many hits. Matches that we recorded at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Iowa. Nice guy, but I'm not a fan of his wrestling. Vancouver has been mentioned as a possible future All Elite Wrestling Dynamite taping location, according to Dave Meltzer. No date set or anything, but apparently of all the Canadian cities, Vancouver could very likely be the first. Also in AEW news, Dr. Luther, who newer fans might not know, but for Canadian fans, Dr. Luther wrestled in Western Canada. He was part of FMW and IWA in Japan, and he's a good close friend of Chris Jericho. I guess Chris Jericho recently tweeted a picture with him, and he appeared in a vignette. He's 51 years old, but he's big, so it's nice to see that Chris Jericho's helping his buddy out there and getting him in AEW, because that guy never I don't think ever made the really big bucks in wrestling. So it's nice to see him getting a chance when they're giving all these guys that have hardly been in the business that long chances. So nice to see someone that really deserves it get a chance. WWE apparently for female recruitment is now looking at more female MMA fighters and kickboxers rather than the stereotypical models that they were after in the past. Goldberg stated on Steve Austin's interview with him on the WWE network that he wants a rematch with The Undertaker. Now, of course, his match with The Undertaker in Saudi Arabia was terrible. However, they both made a hell of a lot of money for doing that, apparently millions of dollars each. So, of course, who wouldn't want to make several $1,000,000 for one match? Again, I don't blame him for that. Ted Hart appeared at the Ring of Honor Final Battle pay-per-view in the crowd. He also appeared at the AEW Dynamite taping last week in the crowd, always with his cat, as well as a recent NXT taping. So this is an interesting thing Ted Hart's doing, going around to all the companies with his cat. So that's pretty interesting. I'll get to some of these questions in a minute. Marty Scurll, sorry, I think his name is Marty Squirrel. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. I did watch a Twitter interview with him today that Wade Barrett had done. He has left Ring of Honor and joined NWA, and he confronted Nick Aldis at the pay-per-view. But then the same NWA puts out a Twitter video of this guy doing an interview with Wade Barrett saying that him and Nick Aldis are friends. So I find that weird. I keep hearing NWA wants to be like back to the old days, back to tradition, but like they break kayfabe so much, like with this picture that I talked about yesterday, the group photo of everyone in the ring, and then Scurll, who's supposed to be like a future challenger to Nick Aldis's title, is doing an interview on the NWA's very social media account saying that he's friends with Aldis. I don't know. And isn't he supposed to be a villain? I watched his whole gimmick is supposed to be he's a bad guy, I guess. But this interview, two things stuck out to me. He came off as a babyface, and also Wade Barrett looked way more like a star and way more like a guy that should be getting a championship shot than this Marty guy. That's what stood out to me. NWA is also doing a TV title. They're bringing it back. The Hannibal TV title definitely is more valuable than their TV title. 100%. Harry, the British Bulldog Smith, holds the Hannibal TV heavyweight title. He could beat anyone from NWA. No question about it. And I noticed for the NWA TV title, they have the logos of CBS and I think NBC on the title. So I'm wondering, they're not actually on CBS or NBC. So how is that possible that you can have the CBS and NBC logos on an NWA title? I don't know. I don't know that question. I'll give you a couple answers to these questions. There's a lot of fans' questions. Antonio Jones says, please tell me what's so great about Bray Wyatt ripping off movie characters. I haven't seen much of it. I don't understand. One thing I don't understand is I guess he wrestled The Miz at the TLC pay-per-view on the weekend as Bray Wyatt, and it wasn't a title match. So does that mean when he's Bray Wyatt, he's not champion? And when he's The Fiend, he is champion? And I still don't get why we need two world champions in one company. WWE is only one company, in my opinion. The true world champion is Brock Lesnar. You can pretend that it's divided all you want. You always mix the shows together. You do combined pay-per-views and combined house shows. I don't know why we need 20 or 30 titles makes the titles have less value. Cameron Kazier, do I watch NWA Power? I watched the first episode, skimmed through some other ones. Doesn't really do it for me. And some of the stuff like the group picture that they did with the heels and the baby face really turns me off of the product, but I don't mind watching quick Twitter videos here and there to learn more about the product. I'm not wishing them not success though. The more companies, the better. I feel that NWA knows that I could beat Nick Aldis easily, and that's why they refuse to let Nick Aldis come to Great North Wrestling to wrestle me when I put my request in for that. Jimmy Fopiano says, I'd like to see Bob Backlund. You'd like to see Bob Backlund do what? Richard Min says, pro wrestling has hit a major decline thanks to MMA. I don't really think it's because of MMA. Wrestling has just got really bad. Wrestling has got really bad. Somebody actually wrote in the comments the other day that MMA doesn't have storylines or characters like wrestling. That's why they like MMA better. It's like MMA has better storylines and better characters than wrestling, in my opinion. Conor McGregor is a better character, a more interesting character than anyone in the WWE to me right now. And sure, they have feuds in MMA continuously as well as boxing. No, it's not scripted, but the characters are more interesting. The press conferences are more interesting. Did anyone see the WWE Saudi Arabia boring press conferences? They were horrible. Frozen Retro says Roman Reigns is a poor man's Superman. I don't have any issues with Roman Reigns myself. Cameron Calzer says me and NWA would be amazing. David Merritt says, do the wrestlers travel with the belts nowadays, or are they just props? From what I understand, there's a prop title that they travel with for house shows and stuff, and there's different belts that the company has that they use for TV and pay-per-views that are fancier, I guess. A couple more questions. Man, there's some questions that are too controversial to answer on here. Oh, an interview with Bob Backlund. I do have one interview with Bob Backlund on here. I had asked him several times for full shoots, but he said no, he was working for WWE at those times doing this thing with Darren Young. So I might try him again. This guy says MMA does have better storyline, and it does, and it's simple. It's like you're fighting for a title in MMA, but I find the personalities are more interesting in MMA too, for sure. Master Mike 1 says, do I think Tessa Blanchard is going to sign with WWE or AEW? Yes, whenever her contract expires. Nobody watches Impact anymore. The product is awful. And she can make way more money in a big company like WWE or AEW. It's going to be a matter of who offers her the best deal, 100%. Connect TV USA, should WWE drop the storyline between Lana, Lashley, and Rusev altogether? What's the point? Well, they just hit their lowest rating of all time on a non-holiday yesterday. And that was another featured storyline. So obviously it's not drawing. So unless they just don't like Lashley and want to keep making his wife make out with one of his coworkers and make it, if it's not awkward for them in the back, they have way different personalities than me, because I don't see how a normal person could watch his wife make out with someone and then just go to the back like nothing happened, drive to the next town in the car like nothing happened. Yosemite Dan says, dump the lame script writers and let the wrestlers freestyle. Just give them some talking points. Well, I do understand how that was better in the old days, but I do understand a bit why they need script writers these days, because a lot of the WWE wrestlers aren't very experienced, and they're taken from like football, amateur wrestling, other sports. They're not seasoned. Like in the 80s, you didn't need script writers because the wrestlers at the top were all great. Now, not everyone in the major companies are good at promos. Some of them would be lost. As far as storylines, I would agree. Have all wrestlers like the best years, the best creative in wrestling history has always really been done by wrestlers, other than when Vince Russo was part of the Attitude Era, but Vince McMahon was still filtering that, and Pat Patterson had a lot to do with it, and Bruce Pritchard, who's a wrestling guy, and even Vince Russo is a wrestling guy. He's not really done much in the entertainment business other than wrestling. So I don't think taking people that have not much experience in wrestling and writing content for wrestling fans is necessarily good. Danny produces, we have an abundance of athletic talent and a shortage of wrestling talent. I 100% agree. Great athletes, boring characters overall. Really boring characters overall. Jojo says, I watched all 3 hours of Raw and it was fucking horse shit. Buddy Murphy is overrated and rips off Omega. I don't even know who Buddy Mega is, or who Buddy Murphy is. I do know who Kenny Omega is. Last question. There's a lot of good questions on here, but I still have to work out tonight. Isban Arroyo says, are you surprised, happy, or shocked that Jack Swagger is undefeated in MMA? Well, I do feel that he has been given opponents that have been basically, there's a high percentage he was going to win those fights. It wasn't like, now Jack Swagger's 100 times better fighter than CM Punk, but CM Punk, for his very first fight, he was put in against a high quality fighter in the UFC. The second guy that Punk fought was another 0-1 fighter. The only guy he's ever beat is CM Punk. He never fought again after CM Punk. So that second guy was horrible. Swagger was given opponents that he would do well against, but in his third fight, that was a draw. I mean, or a no contest rather, because he delivered the groin shots. I mean, he could have easily been disqualified in that fight for those repeated groin shots. I feel bad for his opponent because it doesn't look like they're going to give his opponent a rematch. Matthew Miller says, was it really a 0.6 rating? Yes, it was. I don't lie on this thing. I report usually news that's pretty credible, and if I have reported news that someone is screwed up on, I'll tell you guys. Hannibal, if you were in charge, how would I change WWE? Man, I'm not even going to get into a hypothetical question like that because it's never going to happen. I'm going to focus on Great North Wrestling, which I am in charge of, as well as my interviews, which, by the way, thank you, everyone. I had a record-setting year this year for interviews. I'm almost at 100 million total video views. And by the way, I have way more video views this year than both MLW and the NWA. So for people, Hannibal, you should go into MLW. You should go into NWA. Well, that'd be great to have the paydays, I guess. But I'm doing just fine on my own. And actually, my YouTube channel is more popular as far as views than either of those channels. So thanks a lot. Richard Mins says, great work. Check out my compilation video on the Chris Benoit murders. He 100% committed the murder-suicide. He's a coward, piece of shit, scumbag, in my opinion. Anyone that kills a 7-year-old kid is the lowest form of human scum, in my opinion.